The Navy's attack submarine fleet provide the United States with an unparalleled military advantage. But over the last decade, these submarines have increasingly experienced significant maintenance delays. Diana, what can you tell us about the Navy's attack submarine fleet?
Sure. So the U.S. Navy has 44 attack submarines. These are subs that the Navy uses to perform some very sensitive and important missions. Most importantly, they're very quiet. They're nearly silent. They're nuclear powered, which means they can go hundreds of feet underneath the ocean. And because they're nuclear powered, they can travel pretty much anywhere there's an ocean, they can go without having to refuel for a very long period of time. These subs have extensive capabilities to collect intelligence and information while they are silently gliding beneath the oceans. They also have weapons. So in time of conflict, they have torpedoes that the sub can use to target enemy subs and enemy ships. They also have an array of non-nuclear missiles that they can use to attack targets on land as well as on sea. They provide the Navy a very critical capability to perform a variety of missions. That means the Navy uses them a lot. Another key thing to recognize about these attack submarines and U.S. Navy submarines in general is that the Navy is very committed to performing the necessary maintenance and safety checks on those subs. And for folks who want to learn more about the history of that, you can look into the history, the tragic history of the USS Thresher, which was a submarine that the U.S. lost over 60 years ago. But coming out of that catastrophe, the Navy is focused on maintenance. And in their mind, maintenance equals safety for the crew that operates these subs that are often hundreds of feet beneath the ocean.
I guess I thought all subs were attack subs. Is there different kinds of subs? Are there non-attack subs?
So the Navy has another class of submarines, ballistic missile submarines. They call them the boomers. That's the type of submarine that carries nuclear missiles. They're part of the U.S. strategic triad. That's a different group of subs. Our report did not look at the boomers. We looked at the 44 attack submarines, so the Virginia class and the Los Angeles class attack submarines.
So these are important assets. What's been the challenge in maintaining them?
There are a couple categories of challenges that the U.S. Navy faces in maintaining attack submarines. And the first category is just inherent to any submarine. It's extremely important that the Navy gets maintenance right on a submarine because as we mentioned, the Navy equates maintenance with safety. So there's strict and stringent maintenance requirements. And if a submarine does not meet them, it does not receive what the Navy calls its dive certification, which means it's not allowed to go underneath the water, which means it has no operational capability. So very high standards that must be met all the time. So that's sort of one piece of it. The other piece of it is that a submarine is not like a car, right? You're doing maintenance on a car, you pop the hood. You do maintenance on an airplane, you can take off a side panel and kind of rummage around and fix things. Subs don't have those things. So doing maintenance on a sub is sort of like doing maintenance on your car's engine through the glove compartment. It requires a lot of planning, a lot of technical expertise. So when the Navy is bringing its subs into port to do the most substantial maintenance called depot maintenance, they plan out specifically what they're going to fix and what they're going to upgrade years in advance because it's a very complicated thing. The other aspect is that the Navy, in executing and carrying out this maintenance, has not had a good track record over the last decade. One of the challenges they face is that the Navy has a limited number of places where it can perform this kind of depot maintenance. The Navy does this in what they call dry docks. There's a limited number, which means it's very important for the Navy to accurately plan and execute the length of the maintenance. Because when submarine A is in the dry dock getting this maintenance, submarine B is waiting to come in to get their maintenance done. So if the first submarine is late, then the second submarine, they can't get in. And if they wait too long, they lose that dive certification and they can't perform any missions. So suddenly you have two subs unable to do what they want to do. One because of the delayed maintenance, one because it's waiting to get into the dry dock. We found over the last 10 years, the Navy completed this maintenance on time only 11% of the time.
Is it just getting harder to do?
We found that in some respects it has gotten more difficult, but in other respects the Navy has done better. So the good news is the Navy is doing a better job of estimating how long it takes to complete the submarine maintenance. And that helps them with planning, helps them to have a more predictable sense of when submarines are going to be operationally available. So that's great. The challenge is they are taking longer to actually complete this maintenance. So we found, for example, in 2022, the Navy was completing this maintenance on average in about 20 months for each sub. By 2025, that had increased to 33 months. So that's a substantial increase. So that's a problem. The other problem that we found in our report is a relatively new one, and that's a function of how the Navy has to deal with the older submarines that is going to retire from the fleet. Those submarines, when they're at the end of their useful life, also have to go into these dry docks. They also have to have their nuclear fuel taken off, the reactor decommissioned, they have to be taken apart. Because there's a limited number of these dry docks, those older submarines are now waiting to get into those dry docks for their own decommissioning. That creates idle time because those subs also have a crew aboard them.
What is idle time, and what do we know about what's happening there?
Our report talked about two different kinds of idle time. The first kind is when you're talking about active submarines, submarines that are waiting to go into the dry dock to get their scheduled maintenance. They're going to come out and perform missions. We found that this active idle time has actually been decreasing. So in 2022, it was about 1,500 or so days for the Navy, and that had decreased to less than 200 days by 2025. And that's because the Navy is doing better planning. But we found that this problem with inactive idle time has suddenly become a major issue for the Navy. As recently as 2023, the Navy had almost 0 days of this inactive idle time. So older subs waiting to go into dry docks to be decommissioned. But by 2025, that had increased to over 1,200 days. So that's a pretty big step up. And when you total all this together, looking into the future, inactive idle time for the next 5 years, we project would be over 14,000 days of inactive idle time. That's over $3.1 billion for the cost of the crew, for the sailors aboard these old submarines that can no longer be used, that are just waiting to be decommissioned.
Is the Navy doing anything to address active idle time?
So the Navy has definitely taken steps to address active idle time, predominantly in improving their ability to plan how long it takes to actually complete submarine maintenance. So they've gotten better at doing that, which is why we've seen active idle time decrease in recent years.
The other side of it is inactive idle time, and you mentioned that it's millions of dollars for these things to be inactive, and the sailors are still working.
Correct.
Why does the Navy need to crew inactive subs?
For the same reason they keep crews on the active subs, is because still a submarine, still has a nuclear reactor with nuclear fuel, other sensitive material on it. So they keep a crew aboard. Even the subs are planning to decommission. That inactive idle time, as I mentioned, is going to cost the Navy billions of dollars. They are starting to think about what to do about addressing this problem. So in the course of our review, we found different parts of the Navy. We're thinking about things like, do we need a full crew on a submarine that's going to go into a dry dock for decommissioning? Or maybe we should extend the life of these older submarines. So if they stay operational longer, then they'll go into decommissioning later, and there will be less of a traffic jam in the relatively small number of dry docks. Or maybe there are different ways. Maybe we don't have to use just a dry dock. Maybe we can do some of this in terms of what's pier side. So the Navy is thinking about these things, but what we found, it was they had not done a specific analysis of the trade-offs, the costs, the timeframes, the implications for safety for taking these measures. So we recommended that the Navy do a detailed analysis of all these different options and then take action.
Last question. What's the bottom line of our report?
Attack submarines are crucial for the U.S. Navy's ability to meet national security needs. The Navy has done a better job of predicting how long it takes to fix these subs, but are taking longer to repair the subs they have, and they're facing a real problem in terms of getting the older subs out of service and decommissioned. Addressing our recommendations to the Navy will save them potentially billions of dollars.
Thank you, Diana.
Thank you.